You're listening to the Living Inside Out podcast, and I'm your host, Toks Aruoture. This is episode 97. Welcome to the Living Inside Out podcast, where we believe the spirit is superior to the mind. Episode 97 is Challenges to Opportunities. Steps to help you change your perspective. Hello, my friend. I hope you have been well. How have you been? What have you been up to? If you're in the UK and have a 16-year-old son, daughter, niece, nephew, friend's child, godchild, and you're listening to this in June of 2024, congratulations. It means that that child has finally finished their exams. In my house, one less phrase is going to be, have you finished revising? Or what are you doing? Because like a mother hen, I'm always snooping around and checking and like, what are you doing? Are you reading? Are you on your phone? What exactly are you doing? Or what paper have you got tomorrow? Because I have a 16-year-old and I told him he'd have to get a job, and he looked at me like, why? But it's my fault, you see, because the notion of kids working never sat well with me because I didn't grow up in a culture that encouraged kids to work. I thought real love was providing everything for your child and setting them up for a good life, but I have since changed my view. And this is down to two main reasons. The first is this generation and their isms. I'm concerned about their work ethic, concerned about the way they think, everything. And I don't want to pronounce anything negative on them. Like there's been a lot of negativity around the Gen Zs and how the world is in trouble because their work ethic is really sad and this, that, and the other. So I'm not going to join in and add my voice to that. However, I will say that it is evident that a lack of a work ethic does no good for any country or any person. And if we are raising children to be dependent as opposed to being dependable on, then we're going to have a serious problem later down the line. The second reason I changed my view is because as a business owner, I can see where I could have benefited from learning certain skills when I was younger. I'm having to almost reinvent the wheel when it comes to certain things, putting things in place, and I can see the gaps, and the gaps could have been avoided if I had worked when I was younger. Okay, yes, I did work. I was, 17 when I worked in Asda, which was my only job, my only proper, then I worked as a medical rep. So I had two jobs. The medical rep job wasn't very structured because I was on the field, I was driving, but a proper structured job, like in an office, I think would have really helped me. So son number 4 is going to get a job, whether he likes it or not. And I'm going to keep you posted on how that's going. If this is your first time listening, thank you for coming. Can I ask that you kindly rate and review this podcast and also share it with your network? It's a small ask, but it will go such a long way because when you rate it with 5 stars, thank you very much, you help to make it visible so that other people can find it amongst the many millions of podcasts that are out there. I'm pretty sure that there are podcasts in the millions. There must be. And if you have been listening to Living Inside Out, or you've been living inside out with me for a while, thank you so much and welcome back. And also, if you haven't rated it, or you've rated it but you're now listening on a different app, or you haven't rated it in a while, please do. You can rate this and review this episode. It will help me a great deal. I don't take your consistency lightly. I don't take the fact that you've chosen to spend 20 something to 30 minutes with me. And I really do appreciate you for coming into my space and daring to hear my voice. So I've got a couple of announcements. I still have spaces for my PR workshop on the 27th of June. This evening, I was speaking to someone and explained why everyone needs a personal brand. So I'll tell you. The course or the workshop is directed at business owners or anyone who wants to elevate their personal brand. Now, if you've got a business like I do, I have spent the majority of my business life building my business brand and hiding behind the brand and not really putting myself forward. But a point came when it became inevitable and I had to show my face, and I was somehow being pushed into the limelight, if you like. The benefit of that, however, is that if I decide, hey, I want to move away from my main business, which I'm known primarily for, if I want to go into something else, my brand doesn't get left behind with that business. It doesn't get stuck in the past. It continues where I go. It will continue to open doors for me. And so I think that it is essential for anyone with an entrepreneurial mindset to invest in building their brand. So I've got this workshop where I'm going to be teaching everything that I've learned about PR over the nearly 20 years in business, which is I've learned a fair bit, and also doing it on a shoestring budget because, as you know, and if you didn't know, well, I started my business with £75 and ended up on the King's Road in Chelsea. And much of that was due to PR and positioning ourselves properly. PR is a major part of my business strategy. So workshop is open to anyone who has an entrepreneurial mindset. And if you would like to attend, send an email to pa@toksaruoture.com. And the details are also on my website, toksaruoture.com. If you go to services, you'll find it there and you can reserve your seat there. Second announcement is, did you notice that we are at episode 97? And so for our 100th, I really want to record in front of a live audience. I've always loved the idea and knew that the day will come when I will do so once in a while. I think this is a perfect time to do so. If you'd like to be in the audience, please send an email to Priel. Email address is pa@toksaruoture.com. Let us get into it. Last week, we talked about how our thoughts about a circumstance affects how we see it, because circumstances are neither good nor bad. Now, this is a perspective that we have to choose to adopt. It's not one that is true for everyone, or everyone accepts it, or everyone sees things that way. It's a choice. But we've got to choose it if we want to continue on a growth trajectory, even in challenging situations. It's not a mindset we were born with. It takes intentionality and tenacity to take it on and run with it. So today I want to talk about the benefits of having that mindset, which is in seeing circumstances as neutral. To be clear, I'm not suggesting that we become stoic in the face of obvious difficulty, but rather I'm suggesting a change in perspective that will allow us to see the opportunities that the presence of pain obscures, because that's what pain does. Pain takes your eyes off your future or your vision and causes it to focus on what you consider to be the source of the pain. But first, I've got to say this. I mentioned in last week's episode that I had a really tough week. I'm not ready to go into details yet because really it wasn't a tough week. It's been a tough season. Okay. But let's just say that my story, just like yours, is being written. And God has shown himself faithful again. I remain baffled as to how and why I would ever doubt God. I don't know if you do that too. Like you're like, okay, God, the way you came through for me, I can never doubt you again. But then problems come, troubles show up, and then you begin to say, God, where are you? And, we've all got those testimonies. Are testimonies that reveal to us that there is a realm that supersedes and overshadows this physical one that we live in. In our world, our senses, emotions, logic operate in full force. And while we have varying degrees of introspection and emotional control and intelligence, there is a limit to which we can use those to function optimally in the world. Because Earth has walls. The most dynamic holder of the highest IQ human can still only operate within the walls of this world. Their intelligence or emotional control or intuition even cannot enter into the causal or spiritual realm. So no matter what you can perceive, what you can imagine, what you can detect, there is more beyond that you cannot pick up. There are solutions you cannot imagine, and there are resources that you cannot detect because they are in the invisible realm. They're outside the walls of this world. And as a child of God, you've got access to that realm. So one of the tools that I've been using to navigate the excruciating season has been, I've done all I can as a human, as far as I can detect, as far as I can perceive, as far as I can operate. I've done what I can. The rest is up to my invisible God in the invisible realm. And I believe that while I cannot see him, he is working it out for my good. While I can't see the evidence of that good, it exists. It's just that I can't detect it. And this was the truth that I chose to meditate on throughout the week. Every time a fearful, negative thought showed up. I also learned that being a Christian doesn't exempt us from challenges, but our relationship with Christ empowers us, giving us the grace to go through it. So today I stand incredibly thankful for this lesson. It's been difficult, but it's hugely affirming. Nothing compares to receiving a firm understanding of an eternal truth because, sermons are great, books are amazing, preachers are wonderful, but you having a personal encounter with God, that cannot be argued with. And on that note, I recently recorded an interview on a podcast, a new podcast called Testified. And it is a Christian podcast. It's brand new. That is a collection of awesome testimonies. If you have ever heard me talk about the testimony of my son, my second son getting miraculously healed, you'll get the full details on the Testified podcast. And I'm going to leave the link in the show notes so you can have a listen. It was pretty amazing. In there, I had an encounter and I learned what deception was, but I'm not going to say more. You've got to listen to it. So make sure you click the link when you're done and head over there to Testified and share that as well, because it's a great podcast. It's one that I would encourage you to subscribe to. Okay, let's get back to today then. We have established that our thoughts during a challenging season can either flatten us or keep us moving. But how can we change our perspective when we are going through the fire? The difficulty in doing this lies in the fact that we are sensual beings and we live by our senses. What this means is that even before we think about a possibility, we will react to what we can see. And that's why they say seeing is believing. Sight trumps thought in our world today, even though thought is more powerful. At the start of the episode, I said the spirit is superior to the mind. But in previous episodes, I've also said the mind is superior to the body. So thought actually is more powerful than sight. But sight is more readily available and therefore more believable than the thoughts that we think. We draw conclusions based on what we see before we do so based on what we think. For example, how can you navigate the physical reality of an empty bank account when your bills are due and creditors are actually calling you for payment? How can you carry on when the evidence of your chronic illness is felt in every cell of your body? You can't pretend that it's not happening. How can one hope for a happy relationship when you can't stand the sight of each other? So today we'll look at practical ways in which we can change our perspectives, because that's really what it's about. There are circumstances we cannot do anything about. Our default response to challenges is to quickly bring it to an end any way that we can, end it as quick as we can, or run away from it, just change things. But there are circumstances we can't do anything about. In the previous episode, I gave the example of a farmer that lives in a dry and arid country where the ground is hard versus a farmer who lives in a country where the ground is lush. The farmer that lives in the arid climate doesn't wake up complaining about the ground, saying this ground is too hard, because he has nothing to compare it with. That is his circumstance. It just is. If his hoe or his implement breaks, then he's gonna say he's in a bad circumstance. But the existence of the hard ground is neither here nor there for him, because over time he would have developed ways in which to navigate that piece of ground. And the person who is blessed to live in a country where the soil is soft is not actually thinking, hey, this morning I went farming and the ground was nice and soft. It's neither here nor there for him. That's the premise on which I say that circumstances are neutral. It's not that there are no such thing as bad things happening. It's just that when you're in a circumstance, you cannot necessarily change it to good all the time. And the best thing to do is to have a perspective of, this is the dice that I have been dealt. This is what I've been given. This is what I have to work with. How can I make the best out of it? And that's why we're talking about perspectives in challenging circumstances today. The first one is to embrace the possibility of dual realities. It was during the Trump-Biden election campaign, and even prior to that, I think it was more Trump-Biden than Trump-Hillary or Hillary-Trump. But whatever, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That was when I saw the full force of the American political climate. So I've lived in the United States and I lived in the South, which is mostly Republican. I am fairly aware of their views, and at least I thought I was. But watching the vitriol, the name calling of both parties, and I'm not just talking about the leaders, I'm also talking about the members of the party, those who consider themselves Republican, those who consider themselves Democrats, the way that they behaved, and they still do, revealed a startling truth, that if you are a Republican, then you are an enemy of the Democrats, and vice versa. Families have broken up because of this issue, because people cannot see dual realities. They cannot see that the Democrats have some positive views and policies to bring to the table, and the Republicans also have some. In the US, generally, it's one or the other. You cannot coexist in the same space. Some time back, Tyler Perry posted a heartfelt message talking about his own past attempts at suicide. And he called that the darkest days of his life. And if he had succeeded, he would have missed out on the happiest days in which he is living in today. I've shared this previously, I recall. Now, many of the comments expressed their surprise because he was so happy, and oh, how could you be happy and you've got all this money and you're successful? How can you even consider suicide? How can you say that you had dark days? And that is exactly what the problem is, because we see things as black or white, true or wrong, good or evil. We see things in extremities. If you are happy, you cannot be depressed. If you're happy on the outside, then you're definitely happy on the inside. And all of that isn't true, because in the midst of your challenging season, there is also good for us to be thankful for. But more than that, don't see the end of the challenge as the only thing worth fighting or living for. My recent season was particularly long, and you would have heard me say, don't look for the exit door when you're in a dark place, look for the hidden gems instead. Well, your girl was thrashing about searching for the door. I spent time praying for the end of the matter. I didn't even think to pray for the grace to walk through the storm because I didn't want the storm. I didn't want to walk through it. I wanted it to end. But then when the end wasn't forthcoming, I got up gingerly and started limping. And then I started walking. And then I started running. Embrace the possibility that you can walk in the storm. Remember that when Jesus was fast asleep in the boat, there was actually a storm going on around, and he was at peace, fast asleep, because he knew that the presence of a storm was not the absence of God. And in another scene, famously, Peter walked on water in the storm. So challenges and faith and success can actually walk hand in hand. But if you have a mindset that it's one or the other, you're going to miss out on opportunities to get to where you're going. My second tip is to rest when you're tired. Don't quit. I saw this on Instagram some time back, and it was so powerful, and it really spoke to me. Weariness is a state of endless exhaustion. It feels like you're being stretched like a rubber band with no promise or sign of you ever being released. So you're constantly on edge. You're in a state of stress with no date for it to end. And that was me. The number of times in this most recent season that I said audibly, that's it, I quit. It was due to weariness. I was tired. Tired of being in the same state for so long. Tired of waiting for the end. Tired of not having a due date for my dreams. When we're looking for results and we're under pressure, many of us default to action. What can I do now? How can I change the situation immediately? What do I need to do? And doing just seems to be the one thing we want to do, because we know that we can change things by doing, but you can't take action in isolation of a thought that's leading you there. And like bees, we end up hopping restlessly from one thing to the other. Oh, let me try this, let me try that, let me try this, let me try that. And that makes you even more weary. If that's you, stop and rest. You can't produce good quality material when you're weary. And I don't just mean physically, I mean emotionally and spiritually and in every sense of the word. In addition, while your spirit is trying to feed your mind answers, your mind and body are looking for something else. They're looking for relief. They're looking for solutions. They're trying to get busy. And that will keep you from hearing what God is saying to you, because you cannot be obeying the voice of your flesh and also think that you would at the same time simultaneously obey the voice of God. You wouldn't even hear him because you're so busy. Now, any divinely inspired ideas may be missed out on because the noise of your activity is just drowning everything else. Understand that our worst earthly circumstances cannot stand against an iota of our spiritual reality. 1 second of spiritual truth can nullify an entire lifetime of physical reality. And this is a mindset that really helped me, to recognize that outside of these 4 walls, if you like, of this world, there is a realm that controls this world, which means in that realm lies the power to change the circumstance in this world that I can't change. And one word from that realm, one iota, the realm doesn't even does not subscribe to time. So seconds don't even matter there. But if it did, 1 second can change things. There's a scripture that says, better is 1 day in your courts than 1,000 elsewhere. And I think that encapsulates perfectly the picture of what the invisible realm represents as opposed to the physical realm or in relation to the physical realm. My third suggestion or my third tip is acceptance. My peace was restored when I accepted my situation. But along with that, the dual reality of God's presence also was accepted. That through it all, God's presence was not hopping in and out of my situation, but that side by side, while I was going through this, God was also present through it all. There's usually a lie that plays in a loop, and for everyone it's different, or every circumstance is different. It's like a broken record and it continues to play over and over while you're going through a storm. Because, like we said in the previous episode, it's not the storm itself that's causing the suffering, it's our thoughts about it. So you've got to identify that single thought that's torturing your mind. And often you'll find that it is an assumption which is birthed out of the situation. You know, what will people think of me? What if I have to start from scratch? What if I lose my job? What if my marriage doesn't work? So many of my friends are job hunting. What if I get to my 40th or 50th birthday and I'm still not married and I still haven't met the right person? I still haven't had a baby, and then find out what that lie is that's playing in a loop, because the job of that lie is to keep you stuck, unable to move forward, and your focus ends up being on whatever it's telling you. You've now got to identify it and counter it with the truth of God's word. So, for example, one lie that played on a loop in my recent challenge was even accompanied by a picture. And that lie said that God wasn't going to help me. And the picture was of God standing and watching me go through the storm. See, I knew he was with me because I have gone through a challenge that revealed to me that God was always going to be with me, and I've accepted and I recognize that as truth. So I don't have a concern about his presence in my life. However, I did have a concern about whether or not he was going to do anything about the situation that I was in. And so the lie was, he's not going to do anything. And the picture was of God standing and just watching, not doing anything, that God had no intention of stopping it. And that really worked on me until I started to meditate on the truth that his thoughts towards me are precious. They are for good and not for evil. And they are to give me a hope and a future. If his thoughts towards me are precious, why would he stand and watch me suffer and not do anything about it? And that was how I was able to break out of that cycle of negative thinking, and to show you that it is the thoughts that torture us and not the circumstance. Even without a change in circumstance, I was lifted up and I was filled with joy, just with the knowledge that there was power beyond what I could perceive, doing things that I couldn't see. Know that God has you in the cup of his hands. In God's hands are all the waters of the earth, and no matter how fierce the storm is, you won't drown. You will not fall over the edge because his eye is always on you. Now, if you're going through a challenging season and you'd like some support, please send an email to pa@toksaruoture.com. I will offer you a listening ear. I will offer you prayers. I will offer you some maybe workshops, or I might even refer you back to a previous episode of this podcast that I've written that I think will help you, or I may send you to somebody completely different. As a certified coach, I help individuals identify and remove limiting thoughts so they can finally access their gifts and soar. And I also run mindset workshops and courses, which you can find out more about at toksaruoture.com. What I will not do is offer you crystals or astrology or tell you that the universe is going to help you, because that's not my thing. I don't work in that space at all. Let's connect on social media as well, because I am busy putting out really healthy content. One of my favorite things to do is reading a portion from my journal to teach you how journaling can help you navigate these kinks in the road. And my Instagram and Facebook handle is Toks Aruoture. I'm also on LinkedIn. But before I go, I want to say a word of prayer. Dear Jesus, I pray for the person listening to this podcast that you will help them to navigate this season of their life, fulfill their yearning to be all that you created them to be. Lord, please open their eyes to see the resources you placed inside them and around them, and give them the courage to take the next step. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you for listening. God bless you. Speak soon.